My name is Allison Rose Munn, and welcome to the second episode of this Yet to Be Named series. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about New Year's Eve in New York City. Now, in 1907, a tradition was begun here in Times Square when a ball was dropped from the top of One Times Square and has been continued almost every year since. Before Times Square, Trinity Church in Lower Manhattan was popular for the ringing out of the old and ringing in of the new year. It is uncertain when exactly this tradition began, but by 1846, Trinity Church was the place to be on New Year's Eve. As the years went on, the ringing of the bells became more and more popular. The crowds grew larger and larger, extending here to Wall Street. Now, as the crowds grew larger, they also grew rowdier and noisier as they were bringing their own noisemakers and ended up drowning out the ringing of the bells. After the 1883 celebration, the ringing of the bells was almost canceled. However, the next year, crowds were able to contain their enthusiasm and the ringing of the bells was allowed to continue. New Year's Eve 1897 was a very special year as the clock struck midnight, the five boroughs, the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, and Staten Island consolidated into New York City. In celebration, as the bells of Trinity Church were ringing, fireworks were shot into the air and a new flag was raised above City Hall. Everything changed in 1904 when the New York Times moved up to a part of the city called Longacre Square. The move brought a new name to the neighborhood, Times Square, as well as the city's very first subway line. A New Year's Eve tradition began here that year, setting off fireworks and welcoming revelers with noisemakers so loud it was reported they could be heard as far as 30 miles away. A few years later, fireworks were banned by the city, and so the owner of the Times found a replacement, an illuminated 700-pound iron and wood ball to be lowered from the flagpole of the Times' tower at midnight, saying goodbye to the old and hello to the new. In 1914, the New York Times moved its headquarters from Times Square. However, the tradition had begun continued here. Then, during World War II, the ball was retired for a few years due to wartime blackouts. However, crowds still gathered here in Times Square to greet the new year. By the 1950s, the number of people gathering here had reached about 1 million. However, then, in the 1970s and 80s, that number dropped to only about 50,000 people per year because this whole area had fallen into disrepair. The man who owned One Times Square then said, you know what, I don't want to be spending all of this money to keep up this tradition. We need to clean up Times Square, and began a campaign to clean it up. And anyone who visits today can see that that campaign succeeded. The current ball is 12 feet in diameter and weighs almost 12,000 pounds. It is covered with 2,500 Waterford crystals. The ball is illuminated by over 32,000 LEDs of red, blue, green, and white, and is capable of displaying a palette of more than 16 million vibrant colors. This year is expected to be one of the coldest New Year's Eves on record, the coldest since 1962. It is expected to get down to about 10 degrees with a wind chill of -4 or 5. However, I have to say, I have talked to a number of folks who are here to bring in the new year, and they are not to be deterred by the potential cold weather. Thank you so much for watching. I am Allison Rose Munn, and if you have a suggestion for what to name this series, please write it in the comments below, and everyone have a Happy New Year.